Good morning and happy Saturday. My name is Meghan Maes, and I'm an attorney. I practice in the state of Minnesota. Come here every Saturday to talk about family law issues and things that are impacting families in the court system in Minnesota. I am licensed to practice. However, this is not intended to be legal advice, nor does this make me your lawyer. This is just a great place to come, ask questions, get some free resources. I have a group called Being Civil in Minnesota. We are up to over 250 members and growing, so I'm just ecstatic that you guys keep coming back and have great questions. This past week we talked about some co-parenting nightmares, and we had some great suggestions about how to co-parent with, what I call the new N word, which is narcissist. Obviously, I'm not a mental health professional. I can't diagnose someone. But there are traits, there are patterns, there are behaviors that are common to see in high conflict cases where you have one or both parents that may have narcissistic tendencies. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that today. Oftentimes, the driving force can be power and control. There is very little room for co-parenting if you have one of the parents that are, exhibiting narcissistic tendencies. One of the biggest issues with this is most individuals who do have these kinds of behaviors, hey, good morning, are not going to be getting diagnosed. So a lot of times there are going to be met with some skepticism if you go into court and you say, I'm co-parenting with a narcissist. So how can you have a court here or a mediator here? You have to describe the behaviors, right? So often it's about power and control. And when a narcissist cannot control you, they will control the way people see you or see them. Oftentimes, the parent exhibiting narcissistic tendencies becomes either the hero or the victim, and typically neither one of those are very accurate. However, they can be very charming and convincing. And just say all the right things and do all the right things. There's another kind of nightmare to co-parent with, and that is the one that everybody can see the behaviors, but they struggle either wanting to expose themselves to that individual, right? Having to file charges against them or go to court against them or investigate. So sometimes people don't want to deal with them, and so they ignore it. But that kind of feeds into the power dynamic. So, for example, they may try to be the victim and say, oh, I really wanted Johnny and Susie to be in the ballet this year, but my co-parent refuses to pay for the shoes and, the thousands of dollars. They're ignoring completely the thousands of dollars that they may owe the non-narcissistic parent, but in their mind, this is the time that they can use it to make the other parent look bad or to have either the community or the children negatively view that parent. They will try to interfere with your time, whether that's the actual time you have with the kids. So phone calls, text messages, setting up play dates that aren't on their time to get the kid to come home early, putting negative thoughts into kiddos' heads before they go to make the time that is spent there uncomfortable, unhealthy, showing up late, showing up early, pressing the kids for info, pressing you for info. Like, how many grapes did they eat today? not relevant, right? Unless they're allergic to grapes, and the answer should be 0. Very easy. But that's typically not what is happening. And because these little behaviors sometimes seem so mundane that courts and other professionals can miss it, because it's like, oh, just tell the person how many grapes. Well, but you didn't see the 400 other times where I did tell them how many grapes they ate and they still asked for information. Did you wash them? Where did you buy them from? Did you make sure that they weren't touching any? It's not about the grapes. It is about taking away time from the non-narcissistic tendencied parent, interfering with that time. It's called crazy making behavior, right? So they can sit down and be like, I'm just trying to get information about my kids' nutrition. But that's clearly not what's happening. Hey, I got a question. Do you feel like judges can tell when they're dealing with a liar or narcissistic person? Such a great question. And my experience, right? Yes, courts can typically see the behavior. What information that courts will not have and will need from you is, what is it going to take to protect you, right? So one question I get a lot is, can you actually ever co-parent with a narcissist or someone with narcissistic tendencies? And really, it's so hard. In the state of Minnesota, there's a presumption against sharing decision making when there's been domestic abuse. We had a great question on the Being Civil in Minnesota group about what Minnesota is doing to expand the definition of abuse to include more of the emotional, psychological kind of behaviors, because oftentimes that can have more long-term negative impacts on kiddos than, just physical. So yes, they can see it, but what do you need to happen? So what kind of healthy boundaries can a court put in place to support you? So for example, if you're getting asked about grapes, like I just mentioned, maybe what you need to ask for is a specific form for communication. Is it going to be in text? Is it going to be an email? Are you going to use a co-parenting app like Our Family Wizard? There are lots of options or ways to communicate. And then you have to also get, and this is kind of where I think courts could use a little bit more understanding about, when you come into court and you're you're bringing these issues in front of the court because you have a serious issue. But a judge sort of sees you guys for 20 minutes and has some documents, and they, in my experience, want to give people the benefit of the doubt. The most effective way that I have found to get a court to take action against a parent with narcissistic tendencies is to let the parent behave badly. What does that mean? So if you're being harassed by grape questions, right? I'm just going to keep going with the grape thing. You may have to go into court and file something called a motion for parenting time assistance, because that in and of itself is not a red flag, an obvious red flag that a court is going to say, oh, this is really going to negatively impact the kid down the road. So you have to go into court and be the most reasonable person in the room and say, I would like to limit communication to things that are, medically necessary, request to change parenting time. I want communication to be respectful. I would like any urgent requests for information, say urgent on them, and they be responded to within 24 hours. And so what a court might see is like, oh, that parent is very nitpicky. But really what you're doing is you're setting healthy boundaries and then you're going to have to sit back and wait for the other parent to refuse to comply. You have to let that other person fail and behave badly in front of a court, because a judge is there to make sure that people are being civil and reasonable. And when a judge issues an order, there's an expectation by that judicial officer that they have carefully considered everything, and they are expecting the parties to follow this and have the problem be resolved. When a parent who refuses to comply with anyone else's rules but their own continues to show that, you have to let the court get mad on their own, and it is frustrating. So the long game, when you're dealing with somebody like that, in my experience, is the most effective way for a court to objectively view the negative cycle, the negative patterns, and the negative impact. The issue with doing that, great question. So how long would I need to wait to go back to court? My order was only signed in May. So there are different rules about when you can go back to court, and I don't want to teeter on legal information versus legal advice. But options might be, there are limits as to when and how often you can go back to court, because the court is not the place to be constantly dealing with it's a responsive place. It's not very proactive. So unless you go in there with a clear plan and direction, one idea might be and it might be past the point in your case, but to set up a review period. Ask the court to come back and see how things are going. That way you don't have to file another motion. The court still has the matter under its sort of thumb on the judicial scale to make sure that, it's fair. So it really depends on that. And so, but I would be happy to do another post on motions to modify custody or parenting time, which can be done when somebody is willfully interfering with parenting time or doing something that's so egregious that it's going to negatively impact a child down the road. And what you're going to need for those kinds of things is neutral helpers, social workers, counselors, therapists, religious leaders, and getting the kiddo in to try to process some of this and have a safe space to process these emotions can be really good. Oftentimes you're going to come to conflict with the other parent who may not. You are so sweet. She asked, do you do free consults? She doesn't want to make the whole video about her. Well, that's the great part about showing up live, is you get to ask all the questions. I do offer free 30-minute consults. You can book them directly on my website at www.maeslawfirm.com. That's MAES lawfirm.com. Okay, so going from, yes, I'm dealing with this. What's the magic answer? Well, co-parenting is very rarely an option. So what you have to do is move towards something called parallel parenting. Have very strict boundaries, very clear times, start times, end times. Who's doing the transportation? Where will the location be? Will it change for holidays or early school dismissals? Who can do the transportation? Maybe you don't want it to be you if those interactions are being used as a place to sort of harass or to try to gather additional information. And even with a court order, some people are just not going to respect those healthy boundaries. There are things like harassment restraining orders or orders for protection that you can put in place to limit it. If you have a good judge and you need to just get some sort of clarifications on your order, you can do a motion for parenting time assistance. And that's not necessarily trying to change things majorly, but it's saying, oh, I didn't think that they were going to mess with me about grapes. So can we please put a provision in there about what we have to communicate back and forth? And it sounds so petty, but that's because the other co-parent, hopefully parallel parent, is being petty. The interesting thing about the long game with people with narcissistic tendencies is when you do finally get the court to see what you see, to feel what you feel, and to really believe that you are the most reasonable person in the room and need their assistance. A lot of people will take their ball and go home, right? If they can't choose the rules, if they can't pick and be in control and have that power, and then they just have to parent during their, it's very rarely about the parenting. It's about the control over the children, or the narrative the children are getting, or control over you and how you are, impacted. So there are providers out there that do things to help with this. And I've lovingly referred to myself occasionally when I represent clients who are really going through some hard times is I see myself as a bit of a meat shield. And what I mean by that is I sort of stand in and I get the crazy emails, right? They start coming to me and I can filter that for my client. And I will tell you that is really physically and emotionally, it's hard, right? Because the person who's coming to you for legal help knows it's hard, or they wouldn't be there. And you kind of have to know that when you do this kind of work. And so self-care is incredibly important, both as a lawyer and as a mom. I thankfully don't have the co-parenting nightmares. But I know their existence, I interact, and I do feel kind of the struggles that my clients are going through, because there is sometimes a level of frustration and radical acceptance that has to happen, that you don't have control over anything but yourself, your thoughts, your reactions, your responses, your texts. And so you want to make sure that you are acting true to yourself in your responses and not necessarily always engaging, right? So find support, find a community. This is a great place to talk. If anyone has tips or tricks on things that have worked for them, I'd love for you to post them in the comments or ask additional questions. One of our members noted a really amazing piece. It's called The Bridge, and it's by Edwin Friedman. And it's really, it kind of talks about this exact issue. And so I would absolutely encourage you to go and read it. But basically, it's this individual who happens upon somebody who's dangling off of a bridge, right? And they're like, oh no, I should help this person. So they go and they hold the rope, right? But the person who's on the other end of the rope has very little interest in changing or doing things that will help them get up. They've now just made it the other person's problem who is holding the rope, and that person feels an incredible sense of like responsibility. I'm now holding this rope. I didn't have to hold this rope, but I am. And it goes on, and finally, the person who's holding the rope empowers the person who is dangling to help themselves. They try to, problem solve. And finally, they just say, okay, if you're not going to do these things, I'm going to let go of the rope. And they're like, but then I'll die. and then you've made your choice, right? We can't fix people. We can't change them. We can't force them to behave well or to take responsibility for their own actions, but neither do you. So I think that was a great recommendation. Find a good therapist. Oh, I love my therapist. And I just think that it's such a great place to sort of process things in a way, in a safe space. Find a good advocate, and really know that you are going to be the safe parent. And kids are going to have their own experiences, both at your house and at the other parent's house, and that other parent is going to have impact on that child's experience, but the child's experience is going to shift and change and evolve as they get older and more mature. Kids are smart, right? And they do get it. And, all you can do is be that consistent and safe parent, but you can't do that if you're not taking care of yourself first. So, hopefully this was helpful. You can catch other episodes on my Facebook page, Being Civil in Minnesota. I'm also posting them on a YouTube channel. And if you or anybody else has any questions about this topic or other topics, please send them to the group, and they can post anonymously. And I think it's been good for me too. This has been a really engaging group. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you next Saturday. Take care.